I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
Ladies and gentlemen, the diabolical leader of the Head Knock Squad,
Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to the newest episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. Today, we're going to backtrack a little bit. It seems like on this show, we're always talking about new things, we're always looking at new ideas, but today I thought it would be fun for us to just reiterate what's most important, to kind of go back and put first things first. Because no matter where we go with the podcast, no matter what we discover, no matter who we interview, the podcast, it was built around this idea that there are more efficient and effective ways to get better at jiu-jitsu. And so since we're always talking about different things, and then we'll do even these deep dives on small details and small ideas, and we do these things constantly. And what starts to happen sometimes for people, and I'm not saying that this is what's happening to you, but I think to some people, they start to go, okay, so everything we're talking about has the exact same amount of value. And it doesn't. And so I just thought we would reiterate kind of the things that I think are the most valuable that we talk on the show and kind of have been talking about on the show. And I think it'll kind of help us all get back on the same page. And so that is the hope for today's episode. And I don't really have a whole lot to tell you for my intro besides what we're going to be talking about. This episode to me is really built around the content. That's what I'm excited about, is to just kind of deliver that to you guys. And so I guess without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, guys, so I thought what would be fun about this episode is just breaking down jiu-jitsu progression into three big parts. And it's kind of a rule of threes thing. It's just so much easier to understand something when we break it down that way into three parts. And so I thought we could look at the first part as what everybody is kind of thinking of when it comes to jiu-jitsu progression, and we can just kind of define it. And this is your practice. When it comes to getting good at jiu-jitsu, we're gonna look at kind of inspiration, and then we're gonna look at doing these ideas for a long time in just a second. But I thought we would start with practice today, the method in which you actually try to get better at jiu-jitsu. And so when we're looking at practice is, to me, to develop skill and to develop feel. Those are really the reasons. Feel is probably a skill in jiu-jitsu, but practice is to develop jiu-jitsu skill. Okay. Sometimes that skill is a specific technique. Sometimes that skill is an idea. Sometimes that skill is just making sure you're attentive in class. That is a jiu-jitsu skill that we are often trying to develop, and for a lot of people is very underdeveloped. And so when we are looking at jiu-jitsu skill, we have to look at what things actually build our jiu-jitsu skill. What training method actually builds our jiu-jitsu skill? Is it just live rolling? Is it drilling? Is it the ecological approach of jiu-jitsu? Is it designated winner? Is it positional sparring? Is it all of these different training methods? And we talk about these different training methods on the podcast. But what is kind of interesting when it comes to all of these things is I have this opinion that there is no singular right answer for a training method. There is no perfect jiu-jitsu practice, okay? And I'll kind of just give you guys a few arguments as to why that is, or at least why I can kind of prove that there is no perfect practice. So, for instance, you see, this is something I've always called the Atos method because I think they did it first, the best during my generation that I got to watch somebody do it. But basically, in 2000, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 era. I really can't remember off the top of my head. But Atos had a really good team already and then got some really good athletes that came in and started training too. And they created this room that was so good that, to me, what was happening is they would just have to go into that room and train together and everybody was getting better, right? Just because the level of training was so high. Okay. For those guys, did they need designated winner? Did they need to drill repetitively? Did they need all these other things? Probably not. They probably just needed to roll live. Why? You only need to roll live because you have the best training partners in the world. So you were essentially getting good reps, building skills against the most skilled athletes in the world. That is, to me, the best training method. We've never seen a team really do as well as that group of people did during their time. And I mean, still to this day, it's not like they're not doing well now. But that team has, grown and kind of branched out a little more. But during that 2010, 2002, whatever era that they kind of just ran jiu-jitsu, they had the best room. And if you can assemble the best room, you don't need the best training method. It's funny for me at my school. We're always tweaking our training method and our ideas and the way we're teaching things. We're always trying to grow. But there is this argument, this counter argument that I even give to myself sometimes. And it's this: all these guys they're getting better faster. It seems like the next generation seems to get to what I would call this serviceable level of jiu-jitsu, meaning they start to understand all the positions, understand all the fights, and then even gain some preference of the ways they like to try to win the fights, right? They have specific techniques they have specific ways they like to play. That is kind of, to me, when you get a guy who is serviceable because they can start learning jiu-jitsu at a really high level. But until then, everybody seems to learn a lot of the same stuff, right? You learn a lot of the same techniques, and it can be like we all of our schools kind of have this idea of what serviceable is, what belt you get when you're serviceable. But what I'm kind of saying on this is every time that we have this new generation, they seem to get better faster. I remember when I first was promoting guys to blue belt, and I was like, wow, I have a lot of guys who have only trained for 2 years, and they are like definitely blue belts. And that was like kind of my first time promoting people. And I fast forward to now, and I have a lot of guys who have gotten to blue belt in like 9 or 10 months. And when I see that, I go, okay, well, they just keep growing. They keep getting better. It must be our training method. Well, the other side of the coin is they also have an amazing room to train in. It's better than the room was when the original guys were getting their blue belts, right? Because now those original guys are brown belts and helping the blue belts all the time. And so, or helping the white belts all the time. And so you see this, and you go, okay, well, training method wise, being around really skilled people is just so valuable. But maybe that can't be the answer for you, right? Maybe just training the best room ever is just not an option. And so does that mean your training method is wrong? No. And so this is kind of why I like to break down jiu-jitsu progression into just understanding and repetition, okay? Is because for so many of us, we don't really get the option of just train live with unbelievably good people. if that is the option, I mean, it's the most fun way to get better, right? Why wouldn't we just do that? Because sometimes we don't have that level of training partner. Sometimes our team doesn't have even the same goals as we do when it comes to progression. And so, my answer to this is you find what training method works for you. And so, what training method is going to work for you? You got to experiment with it, and you've got to actually pay attention as to whether or not you are getting better at jiu-jitsu. And I know that that sounds like, oh, well, I'm always paying attention to that. Most of us aren't. I even am guilty at a lot of times that just showing up to practice for months and months at a time and having no intention of, all right, this is what I'm getting better at, right? This is what I'm focused on. Because when we don't focus, we talk about this, the drive home from the gym. If you just did live rounds and you did 10 of them and you go, okay, well, what went wrong? What can I fix? I'm wearing my hidden jiu-jitsu shirt right now. If you guys are watching the podcast on YouTube, which you absolutely should be if you're not. But I'm wearing my hidden jiu-jitsu shirt, and something that Henry Akins was talking about is like when it comes to live rounds, you do this whole live round and you get submitted with a cross collar choke from mount. And then you go, okay, how do I defend the cross collar choke from mount? As if that was the mistake that you made, right? No, you got taken down, then you got your guard passed, and then you got mounted, and then you couldn't escape mount, and then you got cross collar choked from mount. And so saying, oh, well, the cross collar choke, that was what got me. Nah, you made 1,000 mistakes. Now, if you were focused on guard retention, what would happen? You would get your guard passed, and you would know that was my mistake. I should not have gotten my guard passed. My job was to not get my guard passed tonight. And then every round that you do, you have this simple way to know of whether or not you are getting better. Hey, this guy usually passes my guard. I'm focused on guard retention. He did not pass my guard tonight. Go a couple weeks, he doesn't pass my guard anymore. That means that you're getting better at jiu-jitsu. But so seldom do I notice people do this. So seldom do people actually have a consistent focus. And it's no surprise, though, that the guys that do keep a consistent focus, they become black belt level at a move or a position in like 2 years if they really focus on it, right? Because every day they're constantly going, am I getting better at this? Oh, I'm not? Well, what should I be doing to get better at it, right? And so how you get your repetition is kind of your practice, right? So we talk often about designated winner, about positional sparring, about drilling. Those are kind of the three main ideas that we will push when it comes to getting your repetition. But which one is for you? Well, if you're focused on getting better, and you are focused on a specific thing in your live rolling, and you're making sure to get reps outside of live rolling, doing that specific thing. Let's say it's De La Hiva passing. So you're doing a bunch of positional sparring rounds, passing De La Hiva guard. Or you're doing a bunch of designated winner rounds, or you're just drilling specific techniques that you like from those positions. Well, you can very easily do these different things and go, well, these next 2 weeks, all I'm going to do is designated winner with De La Hiva guard. Let's see if I get better. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's not the best thing for you. Maybe you have trouble focusing. Maybe it's too much kind of freedom, and maybe you should switch to drilling. And you go, oh man, when I really repetitively drill this knee cut from De La Hiva, because I understand chest over chest, because I made sure to buy Josh's newest course on simplifying jiu-jitsu, which is a seminar that he taught at Watson Martial Arts recently, and he teaches you about understanding the distance of guard passing, how to never get swept or submitted again. And since I bought this instructional, I know how to chest over chest knee cut. And so I can get drilling reps of chest over chest, and I can hit these knee cuts over and over. And what happens is when it's time to start rolling live, I get put in De La Hiva guard, I can hit my knee cut, right? But drilling doesn't work for everybody. Some people just get too bored. Some people just have so much trouble drilling repetitively. Some people don't find it helpful. That is kind of the first point that I'm trying to make, is that your practice after a certain point has to become your practice. Okay. I have guys at my gym that do not like the way that I teach. They do not like my concepts as much. They learn better with small detail. Should I make them have to learn from me because I'm the coach? Like, no, you guys should learn the way that I teach. What if they just learn differently? Right? And what if I'm trying to force them into this, into this box, and it is going to stifle their jujitsu learning? And then all the guys who learn like I learn and learn how I teach, they just get so much better than this guy who I'm making learn in this specific way. And to me, it just doesn't make sense. And now the other side of the coin is maybe you are still just too ignorant to have your own freedom of training, right? And so that is why you have to be able to look at yourself, look at your jujitsu and say, am I actually progressing? Am I actually getting better from the things that I do? And it's just so crazy to me how many people that I see that just run their head against the wall with the same training methods, trying the same techniques, learning from the same instructionals, doing the exact same things. And they don't get better. And then they like expect if they did it longer that they would, right? Insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that is exactly what you're doing when you aren't progressing. And the only way to actually know is to be mindful enough to be able to say, hey, am I actually getting better? I don't think that this is the responsibility of your coach. I don't think that this is the responsibility of your training partners to notice you getting better. This is your responsibility because it benefits you the most to notice yourself getting better. Your coach has a bunch of students that are all trying to get better. Of course, he's going to notice if one person comes out of nowhere and just starts beating everybody. But besides that, he's probably not going to notice that you got incrementally better at daily Hiva passing. But you can notice that and go, now I am officially 1% better at jiu-jitsu or 5% better. Or this was such a big part of my game that I was struggling with. Maybe I got twice as good just by learning this one idea. And so now comes the question. How do I get this seminar that Josh taught on chest over chest? I'm just joking. We won't get to that yet. That'll be the commercial for today. But that begs the question of how do I find what I should be working? And this is the second thing for me, right? The first thing is our practice and making sure that we are practicing things that actually develop jujitsu skill and that actually get us a little bit closer to our goal, whatever that may be. Okay. Now, where do those goals come from? Where do these ideas come from? Because it's not like you walk into the class on day one and go, I want to be, a master 6 blue belt ultra heavyweight world champion, right? It takes years of overeating and then going into jiu-jitsu and then getting your blue belt in order to be a master 6 blue belt world champion. I'm sorry to any master 6 ultra heavyweight blue belts that I offended. That was unnecessary. I take that back. I shouldn't have said that. I think that was close to being fat shaming. And so I would understand if you guys canceled me for that. But a lot of times this idea, you're this guy who came to jiu-jitsu to lose weight, and you start training, you start losing weight, and you're a little older, like, I can't compete. There's no way I could compete in jiu-jitsu. And all the guys start saying, no, dude, there are age groups, there are belt levels, there are weight classes, and you start to compete a little bit. You get your blue belt, you lose a little more weight. You're still at ultra heavyweight, but you go out, somebody says, hey, you should try to win Master Worlds this year, dude. Or you see one of your teammates compete at Master Worlds the year before, and it inspires you to set a new goal. It inspires you, and you say, I could do this, and then you go do it. And that is one of the most valuable things you could have in jiu-jitsu, and until you do not have it, you don't realize how important it is. And it is being inspired. It is inspiration. And so if you plan on doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, which, spoiler alert, the third thing that we're going to talk about is doing this for a long time. But if you plan on doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, you will need to get good at things over and over and over again. Okay. You will need to be, I wouldn't say you always need to be adding new stuff into your game, but you need to be fixing the way that you think. You need to be sharpening the way that you think about every position and what you go for initially and what angles you create and what distance you create. And you got to get better at those things. And here's the problem. The progression is so incremental that a lot of times it gets discouraging and you're like, crap, I just can't, I can't get better at this. Or you do get better at De La Riva passing. And then you're like, well, now what? Now what do I get better at? And this is, to me, why you're listening to the podcast right now, is because for so many of us, just being inspired to show up to train with something new is the biggest thing that you could be doing. This is why I wore my Hidden Jiu-Jitsu shirt for this episode, because for me, I teach stuff. I teach jiu-jitsu stuff all the time, okay? All I do is talk to you guys about getting better at jiu-jitsu. I interview all kinds of really high-level guys to get better at jiu-jitsu. And those things inspire me, and those things help me, and they fuel my progression. But after getting done, I think July was the last time I competed. After getting done with competition this year, and just kind of starting to cool things down a little bit, I noticed, like, man, I have nothing new to work. I almost feel like I'm still working all the same stuff that I've worked for such a long time. And those things didn't win me a world championship. They didn't win me a pan title. They didn't win me this match. They didn't win me that match. And so maybe the answer is I should just be more consistent on those things and just keep focused. But I started to get to a point where my progression wasn't huge anymore. My progression was so incremental, right? And then I did this seminar, and I told you guys about this seminar. I got to learn from Henry Akins it was like 6 hours over 2 days, and it was huge. I learned so much in the seminar. And then I got to interview him, and then I got to do a couple-hour private lesson with him, okay? And to me, I got so much jiu-jitsu inspiration that he was like, do you have any more questions? I'm like, I don't. I need to go get repetition. I need to go back and get practice developing the skills that you explained to me that I didn't even realize were skills. And when I did that, it almost felt like, and I know that this is the most obnoxious thing that I've ever told you guys, but it felt like in like a 6-week period that I got twice as good at jiu-jitsu. And I know that's stupid. I know that doesn't make sense. And I know that is not a believable thing to say, okay? But I'm telling you guys, it really happened. And it wasn't new training method. Maybe it was a little bit. It was new ideas. It was new concepts. And it mainly, for me, it was new inspiration. And he was explaining things that fit into what I already did, but I still didn't understand what he was explaining. I still don't understand completely what he was explaining. And I'm starting to see little bits of it now. And the progression that I'm getting is exponential progression. It is bizarre how quickly I've been progressing. And when I see that, I go, man, without that inspiration, I would be half as good right now. You know? And maybe I just got 5% better, but maybe I'm good enough now that 5% better is so noticeable, right? But regardless of all that, I am noticeably better at jiu-jitsu because I got inspired, and then went back to my training room, back to my place with my students, and we talked about it, and we've designated wind it, and we've sparred it positionally, and we've rolled live with these ideas. And we're just now, at least for me, I'm just now starting to add little bits, and it's huge. But it came from the inspiration. And so here is my point on inspiration. You have to find who inspires you. You're constantly, if you're going to be great at jiu-jitsu, you've got to be finding new mentors and taking and learning as much as you can from them. And the beauty of the world that we live in now is you don't have to have those mentors locally. I think there is huge value in having those mentors locally. And I would argue that a lot of the time, it's more valuable to listen to what your coach tells you than to listen to what Josh McKinney on the podcast tells you. A lot of the time. Because he has more context for your specific situation, right? He can see you day in and day out and what you should be trying to get better at, right? But for all of us, there comes a point when our coach doesn't inspire us as much as they did on day one, right? When my coach showed me a triangle choke to an armbar to a triangle choke on day one, I had never seen anything like that. And he taught me how to do it. That was huge inspiration. But now, like, if Kyle teaches me that, it doesn't inspire me in the same way, right? It's a completely different relationship now. Now, if we were going over that, we would probably, with a group of our guys, all be talking about this position and all be sharing ideas. And so I am lying to you. There still is inspiration there, but I think that that is not common for most people. I think that most of us get to this point where you stop learning as much from your coach because you've heard the same message over and over and over again for years. That doesn't make your coach an idiot. It just means you've learned a lot of what you need to learn from your coach. It doesn't mean you've learned everything from your coach either. But you've learned a lot of it a lot of the time. So I think if you were to then find somebody else that could mentor you, sometimes you get a private lesson. Dude, the beauty of jiu-jitsu is you could probably pay $150, $200 max for an hour of almost any world champion's time in jiu-jitsu. If you just ask them what they do, what they charge for private lessons, and you just ask if you could do a Zoom meeting. Like, I need you to help me with my training method, or help me with my this or that, any of that stuff. Or even coaches that coach world champions. That is a beautiful part of jiu-jitsu, is that it is still like those people are still in reach, right? All these mentors you can have are within reach. But then how do you find the ones that work? Same exact answer is, how do you find the training method that works? You have to be mindful enough to know if you're getting better at jiu-jitsu. You've got to know your jiu-jitsu well enough, your training partners well enough to actually be able to see yourself get better. And to me, the only way to do that is with the right focus. And the only way to find the right focus is to be inspired. And it may not always be mentors that inspire you. Maybe you get more. I would say for me now, I watch less live jiu-jitsu than I ever have. But for the longest time, that was like the only way that I would get better. I did not like learning from instructionals. I only liked watching live rounds or live competition. And it would help me get so much better. And there came a point where it became this practice that didn't seem to be getting me better, or didn't seem to be inspiring me as much as it used to. I didn't have the guys that I had. It kind of does suck when you get to adult black belt and, you stop being able to study these guys in a sense that you're trying to learn from them. And then you've got to study these guys in a sense that you're trying to beat them. And so it's just a different feel. But when I noticed that, I stopped focusing on it as much. Why force myself if I'm not noticing that I'm getting better? And I started to focus more on jiu-jitsu conversations. And just like, if I can have conversations with guys that have been around for a long time, I seem to get inspired by sentences that they say. So why don't I just do that? And so that has been what I've been focused on. That has been my inspiration. I listen to different podcasts. I listen to podcasts with the same guy, and I listen to every conversation that he's had. And even though it's like a lot of repetition, every once in a while he'll say something that's slightly different. And I'm like, oh, that makes it make more sense to me now. That was the little perspective I was missing. And so now that we're kind of at this point where we agree on the first two big ideas to getting good at jiu-jitsu, really the important things, that the things that matter to actually being good at jiu-jitsu. And we'll look at the third in just a second, but let's take a quick commercial break. I'm sure you guys have no idea what this commercial is going to be about. What's up, guys? Josh McKinney here, interrupting Josh McKinney talking to tell you guys about something we have going on at simplifyingjiujitsu.com. So right now, I have been sharing this seminar that I taught at Watson Martial Arts, and it is this idea of chest over chest. This is just an idea of understanding the two safe distances of guard passing. So there are two distances that you can be at when passing the guard that essentially you are unsweepable and unsubmittable from, as long as you follow a few specific rules. And then we look at maybe some ideas of, well, how do you get to these distances? What happens if you are not at these distances? And we look at all of these ideas, and it's a very generalized conceptual approach to passing the guard and being on top in general. So often we're only given, do this specific technique, do this specific technique. And yes, for 1 second, doing that technique is very important. But what about the other 3 minutes that you're stuck in somebody's guard? This is what chest over chest is for. And then on top of this, we look at these ideas of controlling the lower body and the two places that you can control somebody's lower body, why that matters. And on top of that, we made sure to include this idea of upper body control. We call it the pinch, and it is this way of pinning and being able to keep people flat once you use your chest over chest. And so all in all is over 2 hours of content. There's all kinds of question and answer. There's even some live rolling in it, and I don't really share a ton of my own live rolling. And so there's some bonus live rolling footage, and we keep adding more Q&A to this. Just all the Q&A that I get when we do all these different seminars where I'm getting to teach this idea of chest over chest. And so this idea, this seminar is only available at simplifyingjiujitsu.com. I'll make sure to link in the description. But you guys will absolutely love this seminar. All the feedback that I've gotten so far has been, how has nobody told me this stuff before? And so I think you guys will really enjoy it. But without further ado, let's get back into the episode. So now we know how to get better, right? If you are constantly finding inspiration, things that increase your understanding, and then you are constantly practicing these things, you're going to get really good at jiu-jitsu. But what's the third thing? What's the third, and to me, the most important thing that you can do when it comes to inspiration and jiu-jitsu practice to actually get good at jiu-jitsu? And it's do it a lot and do it consistently. You do it for a long time. So often, the goal is to get super good, super fast. And I think that a lot of the training method we talk about, you can always call back to episodes 196 and 198, where we break down training method. But I think all of the training method that we talk about, if you do it well and you have good stuff that you are applying to the training method, you will get good at jiu-jitsu very fast. But there are people who have been doing it so much longer than you. So when you're looking at it like from the measuring stick of, well, am I good compared to these people? Most likely the answer is no. Most likely the only way that you can be as good as those people is if you just do these same things for years and years, right? And that is always something that has been sold to jiu-jitsu people. That's always something, that I remember when people would ask at a seminar, hey, how do you get your black belt? When I was a white or a blue belt and I would be at a seminar, and they were like, how do you get to black belt? And generally the answer was you just show up. Generally the answer was you just stay in. And as silly as an answer as that is, and as much of a cop out as that can be for specific advice, it really is the only answer that matters. Because you could know the best training method, train at the best jiu-jitsu school, and be inspired and be privately coached by the best coaches in the world. But if you're not consistent, it doesn't matter. If you quit, it does not matter. And so I really think that for most people, they don't quit because they lose a bunch, right? They don't quit out of discouragement. Some people do. And we'll talk about how to deal with discouragement in a second. But for most people, and maybe it is discouragement, you could say that this is discouragement. But for most people that I see that quit jiu-jitsu, they quit because they stop getting inspired. They stop having fun a lot of the time, right? Because in all honesty, yes, rolling live is what we say is fun, but getting good is what's fun in jiu-jitsu. Being better than other people. One of my students always makes this joke of like, wouldn't it be so cool to be Josh and to just go into any room and know like nobody's going to score on me, nobody's going to submit me, like yeah, I mean, to an extent, that's cool. It stops being cool when you go to the tournament and then you do get swept and submitted, you know? But you see that and you go, oh, yeah, that would be really cool. That would be really fun. It is super fun. It is super cool to be able to go in and say, yes, I'm really good. I've dedicated 15 years of my life to this craft, and now I'm starting to get really good. But so many people see that and just go, oh, I want that, right? But the only way to get that is to be able to sit in it, is to be able to continue to show up each day. And to me, I don't think that you can get good if you're not enjoying your training. If there is no joy in your training, maybe there are some people who are just good at, hating their life, and they can. But for me, most people that I've seen, when they're coming up, they go, man, I'm not getting better. I'm not having fun anymore. Then they quit, right? This isn't enjoyable to me anymore. And one of the most important things to keeping jiu-jitsu fun is to find things that inspire you. Find things that make jiu-jitsu fun for you. When you do that, your progression is kind of endless because it is not hard for you to stay in it, right? It's not hard for you to stay consistent. But what if it is the discouragement? What if you just are noticing that you are not getting better and you're like, man, everybody seems to be getting better than I am? This is a terrible answer, but sometimes you have to just learn the lesson of sucking for a while. I have seen it. I have guys now that until they were a purple belt, they were terrible, right? And they got promoted because they were super consistent and they gave effort all the time in their consistency, and they did it over years. And I'm not going to keep a guy because it just hasn't clicked yet. I'm not going to keep a guy at a lower belt and like, hey, this dude has put in what he needs to put in and he has progressed compared to where he started so much. And I've had guys that do that for years and years, and then get to purple belt, and then finally start submitting white belts. And then when it happens, though, usually then they start submitting blue belts, and then usually they start to do well with other purple belts. And it has to click. And to me, that is this, I mean, that's going to be an individual thing. Sometimes you're just not the athlete that you could be. Sometimes people are just better, Sometimes all of your training partners are just able to train more and they're getting better. So you're just constantly losing. But if you stay in it, eventually it starts to click. And I have seen the least athletic people in the universe actually get good at jiu-jitsu. I have seen people get to even, and this is very, very not specific, but people are not common, but people training over 10 years before they actually started to be able to beat up consistently white and blue belts. But when it starts, generally it clicks and the ball is rolling, and it's not long before they're beating up purple and brown belts too. But you've got to be able to endure, right? Sometimes we learn to endure by just saying, okay, he can only squeeze me this hard for the next 30 seconds and he's going to gas. And so I'll just sit here and I'll just take it because I'm safe right now. And if I were to resist and fight too hard, it might put me in a position where I'm not safe, right? Sometimes that is the answer. You just learn to endure, right? Sometimes you learn to endure for years and years in the jiu-jitsu space, and you're not getting any of your submissions and you're not winning your rounds. But if you stay in it, eventually you will start to win. Eventually you will start to get those submissions and you'll start to notice yourself getting better. Sometimes the only answer is that sucky answer. Just keep showing up. Just keep working on getting inspired. Just keep working on getting your repetition. Also, you can redefine what winning even is. Maybe in that situation, winning for you is just not getting submitted one round in the night. And you can go home and be like, dude, I'm getting a quarter pounder with cheese after jiu-jitsu to celebrate that this 110-pound white belt couldn't finish me, even though everybody else can finish me, and he didn't today. And you celebrate that, right? Why? Because then tomorrow you're going to be back at jiu-jitsu. And that matters more than your natural ability. That matters more than the training method than the coaches you have, than the training partners you have. Nothing matters more than that you consistently show up. Nothing for your jiu-jitsu progression. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if you consistently show up. I care about me consistently showing up and consistently getting better. That's what matters for my jiu-jitsu progression. And so I'm trying to think if there's any other reason why someone may struggle with consistency. Let's make sure to add, what if you've fallen out of consistency? What if, an injury, or maybe you changed cities, maybe you changed gyms, maybe you just some change in your life, maybe you had a baby, maybe just something happened and it messed up your consistency. And so how do you do it again? Because you used to train 5 days a week and now you can't train any. And then when you try to force yourself to train 5, you do it for 2 weeks and then you quit again. Well, to quote Chewy, I'm sure he didn't invent this, but he is who I always think of when I hear this quote, is how do you eat an elephant? You eat it a bite at a time. So maybe that consistency doesn't look like 5 days a week anymore. Maybe it's 1 day a week. And maybe that day is a Monday, and then it's a Wednesday, and then it's a Monday. And it's kind of like, and you're just trying to find your bearings again. But once you've hit that 1 day a week for 6 weeks, for 10 weeks, then you can start to go, oh, I'm consistent again. Let's see if I can add a second day. Maybe it's too much. Maybe 2 days it causes you to crash again. Go back to 1, right? All you're trying to do is build that consistency, because the only way to get good at jiu-jitsu, and when I say good, I don't mean blue belt. I mean really good. I mean black belt and better than black belt. Good. is to be there for a long time, to do it for a long time, to do it consistently, to get all kinds of different inspiration, try all kinds of different training methods, and do them for a long period of time. And so that's all I have for you today. Hope you liked this idea of the big three. And we'll move on. And that is the episode. Make sure you guys remember, if you are needing some inspiration, if you're needing something to work, this idea of chest over chest, these concepts for guard passing, I have spent at least the last 3 years focused on and trying to understand better. And in those 3 years, I've boiled them down, these ideas down to a few paragraphs that really, really make sense. And I kind of say these paragraphs a million different ways to help it make sense to you. But the beauty of this is you will consistently know when you are in a good spot and when you aren't in a good spot when you are passing the guard. And you will consistently know each time you get swept or submitted why that happened. And I think that it is going to be really helpful for you. And again, the link is in the description. But that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys liked today's episode. Really tried to just keep things simple and make sure that we get back to basics every once in a while on the podcast. But that's all I have for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.